Hello, and welcome to the Cyber Hub Network, a network that aims to provide you with informed discussions about cybersecurity latest trends, some of the challenges, but also, and most importantly, the solutions that are available to you to address some of those threats. Today, we are here to discuss artificial intelligence in cybersecurity. Now, artificial intelligence seems to be everywhere, in our phones, in our computers, in our text editing software, in our emails, and we don't seem to always grasp exactly what it is. As with many of the buzzwords and many of the media frenzies, it's sometimes quite difficult to tell the wood for the trees. So what is artificial intelligence, and how does that relate to cybersecurity? What can be done to address some of the challenges that it may pose to cybersecurity? But again, most importantly, how can this become an enabler for your businesses and for your everyday life in your business? To answer these questions today, we have three excellent experts, as always, who will share their views from different backgrounds. And we'll have a very interesting conversations about, again, these trends and also the solutions and some of the regulatory options that exist out there to support you. Now, without further ado, I would like to introduce you first and foremost to Laetitia Avia, who is here on the set with me today. Good afternoon, Laetitia.
Thanks for having me.
It's a pleasure. Now, Laetitia is a lawyer specialized in digital law and a former member of parliament for Paris. And on remote, we have with us Elyes, who is managing director at EEA & Co. Consulting. Hi, Elyes.
Hi, everybody. Very happy to be with you all today, discussing very interesting and hopefully also interesting for the audience, very interesting topics today.
I'm sure it will be, if our previous conversations are anything to go by. And last but certainly not least, we have also on remote with us today, Hervé Le Jouan, who is partner and head of EU AI and cybersecurity at Tiger Advisory Group. Hi, Hervé.
Hi, Alex. Hi, everyone. Very nice to be with you today.
A very warm welcome to all the three of you, and it's a pleasure to kickstart this conversation today. Now, as I said, artificial intelligence, many of us have seen the word everywhere, but we're not quite certain of what exactly it means or what it entails. So I'd like to open this conversation, perhaps because you're here with me in the studio today with Laetitia. Could you tell us a little bit from your point of view and from the research you've done and the work you've done, what is artificial intelligence?
Well, we have 2 hours to talk about that. I think I will leave my fellow expert to go deeper in what it is technically, but I think the first thing we have to say is what it is not. Mm-hmm. So it's not artificial and it's not intelligence. Okay. It's a system. It's a system that is created by people to analyze and then put in forms on systems to get some answers. Let's say that in a very, very simple way. Mm-hmm. Then you can have so many different systems of AI. We're talking today mostly about what we call the LLM, because everyone is talking about ChatGPT, for example. And when people think about AI, they're thinking about this. Mm-hmm. But it's not only this. And anytime you're talking about a sophisticated algorithm, actually, you're already talking about AI. Mm-hmm.
Okay, yeah, that actually is very similar to some of the things I had heard, and so we're talking about algorithm effectively.
Exactly, an algorithm that is trained to then get a system that will provide you to some answers or some two ways to deal with a particular problem, let's say that, mm-hmm. in a very simple way.
Mm-hmm. Okay, thank you very much for this. And what about you, Elyes? What is your point of view on what we're talking about when we're talking about AI?
So earlier, Alex, you've mentioned that AI is everywhere. And indeed, it's everywhere. Plus, I think everybody today is claiming that they are doing AI or they touched AI. And in reality, that's so true. Because AI existed, the theory existed since 1950s or even earlier than that. And everybody was doing something. When you're touching technology somehow, anybody is actually touching somehow AI. In doing, for instance, speech recognition or text recognition or computer vision, or any of those wonderful features that today we bundle them all together within AI, plus, as everybody knows, with ChatGPT, that Gen AI also coming into the arena, and everybody now are seeing all the capacity of the technology. But to make things very easy, as Laetitia mentioned, it's it's algorithm to process data. We train it, so that's where the term intelligence came from, and that's where also it's doing some tasks that before only human were doing. So that's where we call it artificial intelligence. And for sure, during the session, we're going to discuss other maybe more sophisticated way to explain it or to use AI, especially on cybersecurity. But in a nutshell, that's how we explain in very layman terms AI on this.
Yes, thank you. And yes, I think, and to come back to your point, Laetitia, I think a lot of people get scared when they hear intelligence, but really it's our own. I mean, from what you're both saying, we're talking about an algorithm that has been programmed by humans to enhance what the humans are doing, to enhance a human task, hence the artificial part of things. So what about Hervé? What would be your point of view for the work you've done and what you've seen so far?
Actually, and back to Elyes' point, the AI has been invented in the 50s. So typically, it's based on mathematical, let's say, theory and theory. And the reality, even me, I have started my AI career in '89. So basically, and I was doing at that time Lisp and Prolog, who were languages to build what we were called at that time expert systems. So basically, this is where, and it was applied to financial system. It was applied already to a lot of, let's say, optimization, network optimization in logistics. Typically, it was applied into that, so to optimize the route. So it has been used so many times in the last 50 years in so many industries. Again, whether the health, the air flight industry, of course, the cars industry. So AI is everywhere, but of course, what made it very popular, let's say, or globally, let's say, as a kind of a wow, let's say, is when LLM and ChatGPT came, because suddenly anyone could see the AI returning something, resolving problems just by the click on the hand. It was not hidden. Most of the time, until then, AI was hidden. It was systems running on the background of something to do tasks, to apply tasks on, again, air flight control, vision control, advertising. When we are targeting in advertising, AI is underneath. Google search, AI is underneath. So basically, but it was hidden. Now AI is seen by everyone in the world in the form of the LLM. So this is where there is a change in the way it's perceived, but AI, again, is existing for many, many decennies and centuries. Okay.
Yeah, no, you're right. And it's, again, as I said at the beginning, it's a media frenzy. Everyone's talking about it now, and I think it's also contributing to fueling a little bit the scare that people have about AI. And since we're talking about being scared, which we shouldn't be, but cybersecurity is almost as non-intangible as AI. I mean, you can't see it. It's hard to describe. It's hard to define. So how do these two things work together? How is AI related to cybersecurity, Laetitia, for instance?
First of all, you just say we shouldn't be scared. I wouldn't say that.
Okay.
I am not someone that would call like technophobe. I don't want to have some anxiety when it comes to technologies, but I think we have to be scared of everything we do not master. So we have to be cautious with everything we do not master. And even if AI has been around for decades, I will just say previously, we still don't master it, and we still don't master the extent of all the systems. So that's why we have to be cautious. That's why we need to know all the risks. Now, when it comes to cybersecurity, I think we are here in a perfect example of what can AI do and why is it so risky also. Because AI is an incredible tool when it comes to cybersecurity, when it comes to helping people doing cybersecurity to do their task, to help create some models, some systems that will help to anticipate the risk, to detect it, to master all the cyber attacks, etc. We can talk about that a bit deeper later, but there are a lot of things we can do with AI, but also AI opens an open door for new kinds of attacks, and it creates a kind of new field when it comes to cybersecurity. That is cybersecurity dedicated to AI. How do we make sure that this new system that we do not master is not something that is very vulnerable and that can just open to new threats? And that's a very, very exciting topic, actually, when we think about it.
Yeah, so I think we're getting to, without getting too philosophical, and I want to turn back to our two other participants, but it's that question between, or that balance maybe between exciting and scary. So there's a world of possibilities out there, which ones are good and which ones are bad.
And it's great once we empower it. I mean, the problem we can have when it comes to AI is that, and that's why sometimes we think, oh, is it a kind of intelligence we don't have? Is that the technology will be better than us to understand what is happening. When we come to this point, it's where it becomes scary. But as long as we master what is happening, we can know that AI can be an incredible tool for cybersecurity. So I think that's what we have to keep in mind. Yeah.
No, I think it's a good point, and I think perhaps it's not the way I see it, but then perhaps Elyes and Hervé and yourself may contradict me, right? But it's not so much that it will be better than us, I understand what is happening per se, but it's more that it processes information much faster than we do. It processes more information that we're capable of as human beings, and therefore it feels like it
because it is the aggregation of so many brains, actually.
Right.
And it is taking the best of all the brains that we can imagine in the world, and this is why it creates something that could be so powerful. Yeah.
Right, thank you. Elyes and Hervé, I know you both work with businesses who are involved in cybersecurity and are also looking at AI. Do you see also what we were talking with Laetitia, like are business people involved in business scared about AI? Should they be? How does this relate to cybersecurity?
Definitely, Alex. So very honestly, and I'll take an analogy. I see AI somehow like a weapon. Somebody can use it to actually defend, and another one can do crimes. So it's the same tool. What is interesting in this analogy is we don't know yet what are all the possibilities of that weapon. So there is many, as Laetitia said, there is many layers in the technology, and therefore in both sides, the good or bad, both sides AI can be useful. So, and I'll take a specific example. We're talking here specifically about cybersecurity, right? So when we think about the usage of AI on cybersecurity, Laetitia mentioned a couple of use cases where we can use it for threat detection, prevention. We can do some automation on how to react to those threats, do some vulnerability assessment, and find out all those with that powerful tool that can, to your point, Alex, that can calculate in unprecedented, I would say, power. It provides the organizations as well as government tools for them to protect themselves. But on the other side, the same technology, same features can be used on the other perspective, where they can use it to scan and find out vulnerabilities, quite often to try to attack people. With phishing and social engineering as an example. I don't know if you remember before when we say phishing emails, first of all, we say, look if there is some mistakes. So today they are quite sophisticated, so you cannot, if there is mistakes, it's potentially somebody write it. So it's the other way around. So all that to say that, as you've mentioned earlier, there is the bad way to use AI, and there is the good way to use AI. And in the future, that's what I've been seeing, that I've been hearing, as well as experiencing in the industry. It will be AI against AI, the bad versus the good, because it's unfortunately above our capability as humans or as organization without AI to beat AI if it's badly used.
Do you feel there's an awareness of this in the business, in different industries that you've been working with, that there's this good and bad, and that there's opportunity and as well this threat?
Definitely on my side, definitely I'm pretty sure Hervé and Laetitia can also echo that. Yes, there is a lot of awareness. People start to see and people start to discuss, and even on the events, on the training, etc., we see more and more that kind of awareness to make people, especially users, because at the end of the day, similar than before, unfortunately, the weakest, I would say, part of the chain is humans. And therefore, we need to continue to train them. And I'm pretty sure we're going to discuss that after in more details.
Absolutely, thank you. Yes.
And maybe one of the problems is that for people who are aware of all the risk, sometimes they will just want to shut it down. Especially in companies, they'll say, okay, I'm not sure what can happen with the use of AI, so I will ask all my employees to not use AI within the company and to not use AI to not upload company's document within AI. And I think it's a mistake to do that, because you cannot be sure that 100% of your employees will do that. And there will be someone that will use one free open source AI to get a summary of a document or get a translation of a document. We'll think, oh, it's just a translation, I'll just put it here and I'm going to have this in French or in English. And it's open some kinds of leaks within the company, and it opens the leaks of also some documents that are under the business secret. And this is why all the companies need to really train all their employees, and also to provide them with a safe and secure AI system within the company.
So we're probably going to get more into the details of this later, but you're telling me that if I put a document, or if I put, I'm writing a small summary of something myself, and there's a name of a company in there, and it's not necessarily a secret, right? I mean, as a journalist, I'm doing that to try and have a short summary. That information is then out there and can be used.
Oh, it can be used, yes, especially if you're using a system that is on open source, because if it's on open source, is that all the data that is used is reused then for the training of the system. So if you're not in a very closed system that some of the AI can provide, and some have also some partnership with the company, so we can have a very secure system within the company. But if you're not using that, you're just putting all the information out there. And that is what creates also so good and incredible AI, because they are mastering so many, they are dealing with so many data. That's what also creates a good and a strong AI. So that's also the balance between what is positive and not,
Right, exactly. So I know that Hervé has been dealing a lot with large language models, and you've mentioned also ChatGPT in your opening statements. So perhaps you want to add something about this.
Yes, so that means we have entered in some way in a different world. Again, coming back to AI system with the LLMs and the ChatGPT likes, such as Anthropic and Mistral and now DeepSeek and so on, and Gemini, we have entered in a different landscape, because those system has been built on, let's say, terabytes of, let's say, billions of terabytes of data. So this is on scaling every day. And then there is an issue of controlling those systems, because in some way, the algorithm that we used to have, and certainly in the traditional industry, were under a certain form of control, because they were trained through via, let's say, data that were under control. To be back on the point of Laetitia, they were training the things under their control. And now with this kind of LLM, these are trained on all the data that we have on the internet, all the public data actually. Whether this is good or bad data, it has been used to be trained on it. So then it brings some new things in terms of, again, misinformation, disinformation, cybersecurity issue. Because of course, when as a hacker, unfortunately, you can use them to generate a program that is going to be able to hack a certain type of system. Because again, it has learned everything. So then we come back to how do we control those AI? And those new forms of AI, let's say, like the LLMs, And this is where comes some questions. And there has been a research recently by Apollo Research, a US-based company, and they have put researchers onto, let's say, those LLM models to understand if they were, how we could control them really. And the big surprise is that basically in the latest version of those models, we were not able to control everything. They were scheming, they were lying. The model was lying to the developers, yes. So basically, they trained the model based on certain, let's say, instructions. And then when they were testing the instructions, it was okay. When they were putting in production, no, it was not okay. The AI was not following, the LLM was not following the instructions and was building its own thing. So then when you try to stop down and to shut down that, he would copy his set of data somewhere else, thinking that, oh, you want to stop me. So we start to enter in a way, not in a game, but in kind of a bad movie of a science fiction where suddenly there is the machine against the human. And this is where we want to need, and we will need tomorrow to have control over that. So again, meaning that this usage of AI and those LLMs can be very, very, very powerful, but as long as you can control it and make sure that the way you're using it is under your control, because if somewhat you're putting anything outside or you're basically trusting 100% those things without thinking about what the consequence of what it can bring, then as a company, you will have an issue. So it's really, and we're going to come back on that about governance and so on, but it's really, today we're entering that world where cybersecurity is completely intrigued with AI. And back to Elyes' point, tomorrow we're going to live in AI against AI. So basically, human won't be able to fight against the AI attacks, so it will be AI against AI. And the analogy with weapons actually is very good.
And just to echo what you've said, I read similar study where they've said 37 to 80% of AI agents try to cheat while they are training them, to be able to either hack the system and to find out way to beat I would say, to win a game. So to your point, it's quite scary. That's where I think it's one of the topics that we're going to cover today. We're going to talk about governance and guardrails and all the mechanisms that we need to put in place in order to prevent such behavior.
And Laetitia, you wanted to add something?
Yeah, what Hervé was saying is very important, and the word he used, trust, is something that is very critical when it comes to cybersecurity, because as Elyes was saying earlier, you can have exactly the same tool that can have benefits and can be used also to do cyber attacks. But you can also have some cyber attacks on AI, and especially if you use some method to attack a system for a government, for example, government AI, like even a chatbot, like a simple chatbot, governmental chatbot. If you attack it so that the information this chatbot will then provide will be false, because you will provide so much data that is not accurate, and then you will just affect the trust in this information. Then you're also creating some vulnerability for these governments. And same for the companies. A company that is using what kind of LLM, and you will have a cyber attack that will just lead to change the information that this LLM will be providing, because they will just provide so much false information, for example, or they will do some prompt injection. I think Hervé can talk about this subject very well. Then you will affect the level of trustness that you have in this system. So that's why you will have some AI that will attack also the trustworthy AI, and then you don't know what you can trust anymore. Yeah.
Right. Okay. So if I'm understanding this correctly from everything you've said so far, AI is effectively, we're talking about algorithms that are trained, and therefore we're talking about data, as you all were saying. We're talking about data, and that data can be, it's what we say about AI usually, right? Garbage in, garbage out. So if you put something good in there, then a trustworthy AI can come out. And then if you put something bad in there, i.e. if you've done a cyber attack to undermine some business or a government, then whatever comes out of there is no longer trustworthy.
Yes.
Okay, so now that I'm suitably scared, I'm going to start at the national, international level. Are there, so I had a quick look, and I know that the EU has done its own regulation on AI. So could you perhaps tell us a little bit about that, Laetitia?
Yeah, so in Europe, we have the first strong masterpiece when it comes to regulation, because Europe is a place for regulation.
Yes.
That is the AI Act that came into force a couple of months ago and progressively will be fully enforced in 2026.
Okay.
And that provides some elements regarding the governance of AI, transparency. There are some elements also on cybersecurity. And it is really to help us empower AI. And with this AI regulation, there is also a code of practice on AI that is on the work in process right now, and that will help us to really understand what has to be done step by step to have a trustworthy AI and to make sure that it remains safe and secure. But Europe is not the only place where we've been thinking about that, because everyone knows everything that could be happening, good or bad, with AI. And I have to say, well, with the new administration in the US, things kind of changed, but the previous administration was the first one to ask tech companies to get some voluntary commitments on the use of AI. And the White House asked also, they took an executive order, I think it was in 2024, that was not a regulation, but a framework for AI. There has been also in San Francisco an international governing around the safety of AI. So this is something very different from everything we've been saying in the past with the big tech, etc. Is the fact that the governments, even in China, they will want to have this kind of look and organization around the governance of AI, to not be overwhelmed with AI. Now things are quite changing.
Okay.
Because there is a Trump administration that is more about let's go and let's see what happens.
Yes.
And in Europe, we also think that seeing everything that is happening with the two blocks, with the power of China, the power of the US, we need to have also a strong development of AI in Europe. And so there is now this idea of maybe less regulation and more intention to develop more AI, and maybe something that's going to change, I think, in the next months. Yeah.
Can't it go hand in hand, regulations and developing?
That is exactly what I think. I think you cannot do innovation without regulation. And if you do that from scratch, if you start developing your system knowing also what are the requirements when it comes to regulation, you do a system that is safe by design. And this works. I think it's worst for tech companies, especially the smallest ones, to go with a regulation and then finally there's nothing, and then finally maybe a new government will come and will go on or something else. They need to know what is happening and what they will have to carry in terms of regulation. And I would really, really, really prefer to have both innovation and regulation, especially for the safety of the users.
Exactly. And we'll come back to this, but I think what strikes me as well is the fact that we have different regulations. So I'm assuming this also is a challenge, especially when we're talking about data.
It is.
But for now, I wanted to give the opportunity to Hervé to comment on this as well. So can we have regulation development and safe AI development? What are you seeing out there?
Yeah, I think I am fully in agreement with what Laetitia just mentioned, is that in some way that means there cannot be a completely free, and certainly as we think about AI, a completely free landscape where anyone can do anything, because again, we are talking about something that already is in hands of some people that can manipulate it, that can do many things with it, and that relies again on those so many information that no one really controls. And if you think even about the GDPR as a kind of a data access, consent, and so on, then when you're talking about LLMs, this is a different thing. There is no database now. This is probabilistic things in memory. There are vectors. So there is no a place where your data, let's say, if me, I have asked actually, who is Hervé Le Jouan on the chat GPT, and he was telling me something wrong. And I said, okay, how can I update the data? You cannot update the data because there is no database with your data somewhere, but they can say, oh, this is the data of Hervé Le Jouan. So basically, this is something which is really different. And if there is no regulation, of course, potentially, anything can be said on anything. And this is where we will need to be aware about that. On the other side, there won't be a global regulation for all, so that means, and we see in the US that already regulations is out now with the new administration. In Europe, we're working on the AI Act, but as Laetitia mentioned, there is an issue in some way, potential issue to be not on the favor of European companies, but the US companies, because the Europeans are going to be, let's say, there are going to be some break to say, no, you cannot do that. You cannot use this data. You cannot train on this data. So basically, they are not going to be able to have the same scale as some of our companies, which are in the US or China, who have no regulation actually. So this is obviously an issue. So then back in the point, there are others, not regulations, but initiatives such as OWASP, which is the Open Web Association. This is global, and it's about security, and it talks about what can be done and what you need as a company and as a developer to do to make the system secure. Because now we're going to be back onto the responsibility of developers, companies, organizations. When they build something, they need to make sure that it is secure and safe by design. And this is something that is very important because we are not talking on, let's say, cars that are going to run without you driving them. So you need to make sure that it is safe before you go into it. And we have seen that there was some car accident in the past when the people are just letting the car go. So we are not there yet. So that's why then there is a big responsibility onto developers to make sure that the system they build and the application they will build using AI will be very secure. There are some guidelines for that. We have NIST, we have OWASP, NIST 2 is coming in Europe. It covers a bit of AI. So basically, those things, they will need to make sure, and companies will need to make sure that they can control that when it is developed. So there is a chain in the development. You have providers, you have users, you have data providers, you have developers of application. All of that will need to be under control. Otherwise, yes, we're going to live in a world where basically anything can happen at any time without anyone being able to control it. So, but of course, again, this is the kind of awareness. But therefore, again, you can do that in a way that if you make sure that this is explainable, you can explain what's going on, you can control the set of data that has been used to train, you can do that, then you can use the AI properly and it can solve a lot of problems.
Okay, so if I'm understanding this correctly, we're talking about something that we're almost touching upon the geopolitical world here.
Definitely.
Right? Because we're saying that we want to, again, if I understood this correctly, right? In Europe, we want to have a good regulatory framework. We want to make sure that we have good AI, that we can use it to enable our businesses as opposed to do whatever we want. Mm-hmm. But then we're somehow sandwiched between other powers that are thinking, no, do you know what? We're just let it go and see what happens. So if what I'm understanding, what I'm taking away from what you said, Laetitia, but also Hervé, and I know this is something that Elyes will want to comment to as well. If we're somehow limiting through regulations what kind of information, what kind of data we can access to train this algorithm, to train the AI, whereas other powers are not limiting this. Does this mean that we're at a disadvantage?
I'm not sure. I'm not sure we can say that yet.
Okay.
I'm not sure we can say that. And this is not only limiting the excess of data, this is also limiting, putting some limits to how we can use AI, especially in some kind of systems.
Okay.
And also making sure that when we are in what we call in Europe high-risk systems of AI, everyone that is involved I mean, people where the data is used and people who use this data also are fully aware of what is happening and fully aware of how works this system. This is what is mostly about the European regulation.
Okay.
It's about transparency, it's about risk assessment, it's about auditing on a regular basis so that we're fully aware. That's why I was talking about empowerment, is mastering the system. And then I cannot tell you today if an American system can use French data that will not be allowed to be used under European regulation yet, because we're still all trying to figure out what is happening.
Elyes, did you want to comment on all this as well?
Definitely, Alex. And I think with AI, what is, in my opinion, very important to understand, it has that much potential, as well as it offers that much opportunities. It's using data to allow those, I would say, countries, companies, to leverage, I would say, some intelligence. Therefore, I think it's one of the, maybe before that it was the nuclear type of technology that was considered as sovereign technology, but we all know today that AI is considered as sovereign technology, where you've mentioned earlier, there is geopolitics, there is even different mindset and culture on how we can use also personal data. You've mentioned earlier, Laetitia, that in Europe, it's usually the, I would say, good student in the class, where usually everything is properly structured. We have governance, we have rules. Where you look more into, let's say, US, where it's more, I would say, entrepreneurial. They allow, I would say, organizations to innovate, to be borderline in terms of regulation, just to be more creative. And on the other side, you have China, where it's a black box. You don't even know what's going on there. So it's quite complex. But again, in my opinion, and even not even in the government level, even in the organizational level, Alex, people are seeking for such governance. People are seeking for some structure. Wild West cannot be, I would say, cannot be sustainable, because otherwise you will have, I would say, an unfair competitiveness. People using the data in good or bad way. So it's quite complex. Just to give you an idea, I used to be, I'm originally from Canada, and I came to UAE. Similar to Europe, UAE was one of the first regions around the globe that created, for instance, the Ministry of Artificial Intelligence since 2017.
Okay.
And in 2023, they appointed in each and single entity of the government, like ministries and even other entities, government entities, they appointed chief AI officers. They also put in place what we call the UAE national regulation. But again, they did it on their, I would say, for their jurisdiction. Again, because they also in Dubai and Abu Dhabi, they want to position themselves globally as a hub for AI, a lot of innovation, etc. So they want to also bring investors, telling them, look, it's properly structured here, so you can be innovative in a structured way. And again, as you've mentioned earlier, battle started, and maybe you've heard last week about the no DeepSeek on governments on government device act, which banned all the in US that banned all the government users to use their DeepSeek on their devices. Same for Canada, same for South Korea, etc. So you can see also the geopolitics playing it. Remind us Huawei, it remind us TikTok, etc. So all those are, I would say, kind of competition between the different powers to try to be, I would say, on the front end of the technology and be more innovative and therefore push forward their economy.
This is what I really like about the US. So I worked a year in DC also. And what is very, very funny is that they will have very, very strong measures when it comes to national security. So they don't want to have American data processed by a Chinese company. That is why they will ban DeepSeek. That is why there was a time where I wanted to ban TikTok also. But it's nothing about security, safety, or transparency when it comes to American companies, because they're Americans, so there's no problem. And so there is no problem to process European data, African data, everywhere data. But when it comes to American data processed by the others, they can be very, very strong. And that's where we need also to balance things and to work more on our sovereignty too. Yeah.
So hang on, what would this mean then in terms of like, I understand that...
That means that the US understand that sometimes you have to protect your data.
Yeah.
They understand that when it comes from Chinese companies.
Yeah.
So they should understand that the Europeans want to protect their data as well from the Americans company, even though I'm not putting the US and Chinese on the same place when it comes to democratic issues, obviously. But still, they know you can be strong on protecting your citizen when you want to be sure that everyone doesn't do whatever they want with their data. They know you can do things. So they should open the discussion for how to create a global governance on transparency, for example, on risk assessment, for example, for everyone, because the way we're dealing with that today is not good enough.
With risk assessment, transparency, all that.
Yes.
Okay, so in terms of, I wanted to go back to you, Elyes. You've mentioned a couple of times, that at a business level, there's quite a few things that you can do, and I know Hervé also mentioned this. So what can be done? We have this regulation that at the moment we're still trying to find our footing. We're trying to find our place in the world as well, as you were mentioning, Laetitia. So what can be done every day at the business level, and who can help them?
So, Alex, I'm going to try to be pragmatic because I want to be concrete. So, very honestly, this is what I've been building with my clients, with the organization that I'm helping. It comes to, in very basically, to put some structure around people, process, and technology. Because bottom line, putting the structure around the governance, putting the right measures, etc., supporting them by the right process, you will be able to identify what are the steps that either while we are developing our own, I would say, AI tools, or when we are buying it and using them, as well as when we want, for instance, to share data. So the process will be a structured way for everybody within a specific company to be able to I would say, use those technology in the right way. People, it's extremely important. I think you've mentioned at the beginning of the discussion about awareness, about training, about making them understanding. You've mentioned earlier, I was lucky enough to work back in Canada in a very, I would say, innovative company where they allow us to, I would say, use AI, but right away they figure out the way that we need also to protect our IP, to protect our client data, etc. So there is a specific way for the users to be able to use properly the AI in the right way, not sharing client data, but copy-paste them on ChatGPT and trying to correct an email mistakes or spelling. It's not the right way of doing it. Or it's to build the technology to allow you to do it in your own, I would say, environment in a protected way. Last but not least, it's also to be able to, I think the discussion also it's about cybersecurity. It's also to ensure that the tools that you are buying, that you are investing on, will help you to be able to secure your turf, to secure your company interest, as well as to monitor, because it's very important to try. There's a lot of very wonderful tools these days, leveraging AI against AI, or AI also surveilling, I would say, the hackers, etc., to ensure that we are protecting the interest. So, in a nutshell, it's all about, as I've mentioned, a way to put that structure about people, process, and technology that organization will be able, therefore, to leverage AI and de-risk their usage of AI.
Right. And I think, Hervé, also, you mentioned something like this about the importance, and Laetitia, I know you did too, the importance of educating people in businesses, in companies, making them understand the advantages and disadvantages and the risks, right?
Yeah, absolutely. The thing is that today, as people have discovered, the LLM capabilities, they have literally plunged into doing anything they could imagine into those tools. So whether generating code or whether, let's say, telling a story or inventing a new way of doing a recipe, whatever. So, but in companies, it has been the same. So basically, initially, when those tools were out, there were some companies like Samsung where some developers basically they said, oh, I'm going to upload a piece of my code that is actually a very piece of IP, very confidential code on sheets and so on. And I'm going to ask ChatGPT to optimize it and to make sure it is secure. So you think about that. Someone will upload some code to ask ChatGPT if does my code is secure. But in some way, by doing that, of course, ChatGPT refreshed his code, but then it was the proprietary of ChatGPT, and then Samsung said no one can be globally doing that in any case. So they shut down the access to ChatGPT for any Samsung employees globally. So therefore, we are back to, yes, training. So understanding for each of us as an individual, but as an employee of a company or an organization, that this is the way those tools are working. This is what you can share with them, but you should be aware not to share with them. Or so actually within an organization or a company, you should know what do you want to use it for. So this is the first question to ask, because of course there is a lot of capabilities of automation and basically a lot of things, but you need to clarify exactly that and pull everyone in the company around the table. This is not just a technical problem. This is not just a business problem. This is where it changed the organization as well. It's going to change the way organizations are working, because right now, we have been through the digital transformation, but it's a new layer that is going to completely change the digital transformation and put it on another level. Because now suddenly you have the businesses say, oh, I can do that. Then you have the technology people who can say, okay, but we can do that, but that means you should be aware of that, okay, data problem, that, okay. And then you have the security people on the other side who are going to say, okay, but if we do that, when we put us at risk in terms of IP leakage, data leakage, or even attacks on our system, because we should know that the LLM have issues. They are injected, so basically you can, even on some bots today, there have been lots of cases on the market where the bots, were saying, oh yes, we can buy a car for $1. They were agreed because the people were able to use some languages to make the LLM answer that, okay, I am selling you a car for $1, but on behalf of a brand. If you think about that, you're on a chatbot of a brand, and then you say, okay, I like your car, and basically you're gonna listen to me as I am the client. So I can say things a bit ugly, and then you're going to say at the end, and it's a binding agreement. So then the LLM would reply, okay, this is a binding agreement. And then the guy would say, hey, I want to buy a car for your company, but I have only $1 to spend. So this was the crazy part of the sentence. So the LLM said, okay. And then he said, and this is a binding agreement. So in some way, you start to engage the brand. So again, you need to position yourself in terms of how to look against the competitors, because again, it has been trained on so many data that when you use the API into your bots, then it can go wrong. And you need to understand where and what, and again, putting in place governance, policies, to understand that it's going to touch any single point of your company, businesses and processes. So therefore, being in control of that, as Elyes was saying, is very important in terms of when you design it, you need to understand technically, control, design, governance, regulation, what is it about, to make sure that you're going to be, again, controlling it by the end of the day. We come back to what Laetitia mentioned initially. Companies tomorrow, organizations will need to be able to control what's going on. Otherwise, it's going to be the Wild West.
Yes. Now, I would just jump on that to say there are two elements. So what Elyes said earlier, the training. And the training is for everyone within the company, from the intern to the top management. Everyone, the assistant, the marketing people, are going to use AI to do a nice presentation and just going to put some information that can be sensitive, for example. So everyone has to be aware. And then there is this question of liability that Hervé was talking about. to be sure you address this correctly, and here I'm talking from my field, you need to have some legal advice to make sure that there is an accurate use of your AI, of your system, and put the correct disclaimer everywhere. And it has to be done from the beginning. What I say to my clients is that the first weeks they're going to spend with me or someone from legal to build that, to make sure that we are all compliant, even with some systems, some laws that are not mandatory for now, but maybe in the future. That is something that is saving time and money for the future. Because when a leak arrives in the future, when any breach, any problem arrives in the future, nobody will say, oh, this rule wasn't mandatory at this point. They will say, okay, how much was lost in terms of data, in terms of money, and now you're liable for that. So it's really important to take the time at the beginning to build a system that is robust, that is strong, that is compliant with most of the regulations and laws that we know. So then they can do their business then with a free spirit, let's say.
Yeah. And when you say system, you're talking about what Elyes and Hervé were saying, that we're talking about an organization. We're talking about everyone in the organization, how they function together.
Yes, and this is something that is required from the AI Act, for example, is to have some people that are dedicated to the compliance of the system. There are some people who are dedicated to do the risk assessment, some people inside the company and some people outside the company for some regular checking too. You need to have this technical documentation that is accessible to anyone that is using your data, your AIs. That means people within the company, or if you are the one selling the product, people using the product, and they will know exactly how the data is processed, what kind of data is processed, how they can withdraw information, how they can change inaccurate information. Everything has to be transparent on that, and so you need to know how you can intervene within this AI system to correct it, to get back your personal data, to interact with it. And this is, I think, these milestones from the AI Act that are the most important, and that, for me, does not prevent for doing any good business or innovation.
Right.
And concretely speaking, if I may, Alex and Laetitia, with one of the big company, a global big company that I've worked with, we were able to put in place a kind of governance linked to the innovation where, to your point, Laetitia, we've brought definitely the business unit that will be used the tool part around the table, but as well as cybersecurity, people responsible for the IP analysis, data privacy, but also never forget, to your point, Laetitia, legal as well as HR, because in many cases also related to automation, and somehow quite often there is some jobs that will be changed based on the usage of the technology. So in that global company, we've put that we call it the AI SWAT team all together in order to be able to analyze the AI impacts. Because as you've mentioned, Laetitia, let's say if a generative tool is suggesting something and the employee used it, and we suddenly noticed afterward that it's not aligned with a specific law, who is accountable? At the end of the day, the organization will be accountable. But what's the responsibility of the user? What's the responsibility of the tool providers as well as the organization itself? So it's somehow quite complex. That's why we've put that SWAT AI team to be able to address that.
Yeah, and in some way, something interesting here is that we're coming back as well to the insurance, because by the end of the day, that means it's always, and since the digital world has moved, there has been this kind of insurance to cover data leaks, to cover attacks, but then they are requesting control over what you're doing. So basically now the insurance are coming back to you and say, okay, can you prove me that you have put in place the right measure, the right mechanisms to avoid any of the kinds of attacks? And this is the same, and this is where we are coming with the LLM and everything that is going to be automated, let's say, on the back of us and doing great things, but it's doing on the back of us. who is accountable if there is an issue? It's like the car automation. Today we see that, the car is automated, but we don't go there because who's taking the responsibility if there is a car accident? Is it the car manufacturer? Is this the software developer? Is this the camera? That means vision that is within the car. There are so many, let's say, stakeholders into AI to build the full system that now the responsibility and basically the dollar in front of a risk is very difficult to assess. And that's why right now the insurance will be in the play very soon in front of companies to say, okay, guys, you have built something, can you prove that and that? And that's why they absolutely need, back to Elyes' point, to put in place governance, regulations into the company, policies, in order to demonstrate that they can track what's going on, even it's automated in the back, they can track it, and they can stop it eventually, instead of just leaving it going on, because the agents right now are moving into the space of doing automating tasks without any human intervention. All of that will need to be under the control if we want to go and make sure that it's valuable and it creates a lot of value. It can create, but we need to control it.
Mm-hmm. Well, I'm very glad you talked about insurance, actually, Hervé, because this will be the next roundtable that we'll be holding here in Paris, where we'll be talking about cyber insurance and what it means and how do you calculate risk, where do you place it. So you've opened the door to the next one. So thank you so much for this, and in fact, thank you so much to the three of you for this really interesting conversation. I am glad we finished on everything that is possible, because there was a moment there where I thought, okay, AI is very scary. But no, I think it's important. I mean, nobody should be absolutely traumatized by the idea of AI, no. But it is important to have a sense of what the risks are that are involved, and also to know that there are solutions out there that are being worked on, and that there are companies that are also
like everything, enjoy and be safe.
Yeah, in moderation. Well, thank you so much again to the three of you for being here with me today, and I really hope that our audience enjoyed this conversation as much as we did. And please do join the network, and you will see many conversations springing also on the network on LinkedIn. Thank you so much, and thank you to our panelists.